Welcome to Ion Franchising, where you will learn the A to Z's of franchising. Welcome back to another great episode of Ion Franchising. I'm your host, Lance Graulich, and today, yes, I have an incredibly special guest. Special guest today. So, founded in 1960, this organization is not only the world's oldest, but largest organization representing franchising globally. And this gentleman has been with this organization for 10 years. And not only that, he's been the president and CEO for the last year. Welcome to the show, Mr. Matt Haller.
Thank you, Lance. Great to be here.
Matt, it's so wonderful to have you here. So let's kick this off with let's go back to your history. How did you get in franchising in the first place?
Like a lot of people, it sort of found me at a moment in my career that I was looking to make a change. Now, didn't know much about franchising. I'm in Washington. My background is government and politics and advocacy work. And the IFA, whose mission is to protect and promote and enhance franchising, a big part of that is advocacy work. We'll talk about some of those issues, I'm sure. They were looking for a communicator, kind of advocate, hybrid type person to come into the team. And that's exactly what I was interested in, doing and had background in doing. It just hadn't done it on behalf of this industry or this sector of the economy. So that's how it found me. Had a number of different positions at the association over the decade or so that I've been here, and was fortunate to get an opportunity to lead the organization last year when our previous CEO, Robert Crisanti, left. So it's a great business model. I don't have to tell you that. You've lived and breathed it from every corner of the sector, but I know part of your audience is people thinking about getting into franchising or how to make more of it. It's an easy job to represent in terms of the story and what we do for all three legs of the stool, as I like to call it: franchise brands, franchisees, and suppliers, and even employees. And that's sometimes a part of franchising that is criticized by some for not doing enough. But we have a great story to tell, and it's my pleasure to be able to communicate that to people that don't always fully understand or appreciate what franchising does.
Yeah. Well, and you hit one thing on the head. I wanted to talk about like the mission of the IFA, and you mentioned, the kind of the three-legged stool, if you will, the franchisor, which is the parent company that's actually doing the franchising. And then you have the franchisees that buy into the franchise, and then as well as the suppliers, or the third valuable leg of this stool, if you will. So, it's all about protecting, enhancing, and promoting everything within the franchise world. So, when you got into this, tell me more about what your thought process was like. People think of franchising, they think of McDonald's. So, there's a lot of small brands. There's a lot of large brands. And then there's now brands in 300 different categories?
On average. So yeah, people tend to think about the restaurants, and particularly the quick service restaurants. But you're staying in a hotel on some business trip, you're likely staying in a franchise property. You're dropping your kids off at a after school, daycare center. That could likely be a franchise. You got maybe your parents are, getting medical treatment or companionship service. A lot of those are franchised. Maybe have a gym membership. That's probably a franchise. You're getting a haircut once a month. Maybe you're popping into a franchise to do that. Your dog's getting walked while you're out at the office. That could be a franchise. There really are so many. I could go on and on across the 300 sectors. But some of what IFA does beyond just advocating and some of the lobbying work that we do is education, and educating. Maybe the person that's got a business or an idea and thinks it's franchisable. We'll teach you, how to do that, how to not do it, because there are sometimes people that get in this for the wrong reasons. They think, we're just going to sell a bunch of locations and not build the right operational support to support your ongoing franchisees, or maybe they'll hire, the wrong type of vendor that, isn't what they need at that stage in the franchise development process. So, that's a big part of what we do at the IFA, and it's a really dynamic and growing sector of the economy. There's always new types of businesses being franchised in categories. You're like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Right.
So, you brought up another great point, growth in general. I mean, the numbers I have here is, $780 billion worth of economic output, 8.2 million jobs, 3% of gross domestic product or GDP, and 759,000 franchise establishments, 759,000. Pretty incredible numbers. So we're talking even through the pandemic, which hit in, call it March of 2020, when I know a lot of my friends that were franchisors and franchisees that were panicking, like, what is going to happen now? Walk us through the pandemic.
Yeah, the pandemic, in many ways, it reinforced kind of the whole point of franchising in my mind. Because when you become a franchisee or you become a franchisor, like really what you're buying, in lieu of going it kind of your own way, is you're buying a built-in support network, right? For marketing, operations, technology, you name it. But in the pandemic, you had this situation where nobody knew what was going to happen next, particularly that early period of time in March.
Like when the shutdowns first happened, everybody was like,
that wasn't there were no franchise agreements that dealt with, or operations manuals that dealt with, the government is not allowing your business to, take in customers, or, even if you're a mobile business, like the government is not allowing you to go into somebody's home or business to perform your product or service. Let alone if a customer would actually invite you in to do that at a certain point. And so, you had this support network that the brands were working with their franchisees to develop, new ways of delivering their product or service, or navigate some of the COVID and government relief programs that were out there, the ever-changing patchwork of rules. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, as we've recovered from those shutdowns and the economy, franchising was impacted, and it was impacted in a negative way, just like everyone else. But it's all relative to what, right? So if you look at non-franchise businesses, operating a similar category, whether it's restaurants or gyms or salons or you name it, they're all performing better than those non-franchise small businesses were. And I think that when I say the pandemic reinforced kind of the whole point of franchising, you have that built-in support network. You had people in the same situation that you were. You had brands who were ensuring that their franchisees could remain, profitable and in operation, relaxing, fees or royalties and things like that to get to the other side of this, and do it together.
Yeah. I know quite a few franchisors that called their attorneys, called their CPAs and said, I'm hearing about this PPP money. We have to do something for our franchisees and help them. And they organized some of that for their franchisees, which is pretty incredible because, as you know, it was quite confusing. Who's going to get you, the most money? Who's going to get you money at all? And there were quite a few independent businesses that were pretty stuck with nothing. And maybe others that took it selfishly that didn't necessarily need it. That's a whole other story, not for this show. But franchising in general was so supportive. I couldn't believe some of the things that I saw throughout the pandemic. So let's talk a little bit more about today then. Let's kind of switch gears. Franchising certainly made it through the pandemic. I had so many home services brands, Matt, that just killed it during the pandemic, where people were sitting at home during the lockdown, like, I think I need to have my closet redone. I think I need new flooring put in my house. And some of these brands just had incredible growth, not to mention my old restaurant concept, Wingstop. I was a multi-unit franchisee of. People realized they didn't have to go in the restaurant, just more Uber Eats orders to the house, more digital online orders. They go and pick it up, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a pretty incredible thing to see in action. Now, today with inflation and a pending recession. I mean, a recession, last I looked, Matt, was defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. And I think we'll probably be experiencing that second quarter GDP right about now. But how has franchising fared during recessionary times?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's always compared to what, right? So we will have more slower growth this year and probably next, given the inflationary impacts and the likely recession. I think we're in a recession, whether it's technically or not yet. But at the same time, it depends where you are, right? In terms of what sector you're in. A lot of restaurants that are lower cost, consumers will trade down, as they say, into some of these types of businesses. So that can actually be a good thing. You also, depending on the type of recession, like in 2009, we saw a lot of people leaving the workforce and going into franchising. So new franchise business starts were pretty good coming out of that one. Now that was more of a credit crunch. So access to capital was a real challenge in 2008, 2009, 10. We're not seeing that now. I mean, people have cash. You talk to the banks. They're ready to lend to small businesses. I think the issue right now is kind of cost of goods and labor, and the lead time from franchise lead to deal is really being extended out right now. And I think that is just a result of the overall uncertainty of what's going to happen with the economy, and the cost of if it's a build out in terms of a retail or a restaurant situation, that is kind of pushing things out a little bit right now. And so there are some things in the economy right now that are a challenge, but franchising is very resilient, and we always overperform in terms of the broader economy, and I fully expect that we will see that whenever we get to the other side of this period that we're in. A lot of people are watching what the Fed is going to do with interest rates. I think the biggest challenge in franchising is our franchisors, especially those early stage franchisors that need to do and add unit growth. Are they going to be more focused there, or are they going to really hunker down and ensure the profitability of their existing franchisees? And I think that it often selling that next location can feel really good, but are you overextending your ability to support who you have in your system today? And that's as, if not more important, because a new franchisee, a smart one who's doing the right research, is going to look at that profitability of those existing locations. And that profitability is really what, lends itself to the long-term success of that franchisor system. So
you bring up another great point, Matt, because what I preach to people on a regular basis and educate them on as a franchise broker is the fact that, I'm going to find you your perfect business, whether you believe it or not. And most people don't believe it in the beginning. They think I'm crazy. It's like, how's this guy going to know this? And the reality is this franchise system, with the FDD, knowing there's an item 19, knowing there's an earnings claim that you get to investigate or go through. Some of them quite simple, and others have a lot more detail depending on many factors. But then you now have the ability to talk to existing franchisees, and you hit on a lot of important things that can give people great comfort, knowing when you talk to existing franchisees and validate with the brand, especially, let's say, the pandemic, because now we've just come through a pandemic. Thankfully, I think it was just announced yesterday that there's no longer any COVID testing for people coming into the country. I think that just stopped yesterday. So Clearly there are big changes. So with the validation, so tell me how you were treated as a franchisee during the pandemic. What did the brand do for you? Did did it exceed your expectations, et cetera? So you and I both know that the system for franchising is set up as good as possible to bring people the information they need so they can draw a conclusion that hey, I think this brand is for me. I think this brand or not, and I'm going to move on and look at another brand. What do you say to that? When people are talking about, I mean, there's not really a mystery in a lot of cases with existing franchise brands.
Yeah, I mean, the franchise disclosure document, it really is, a great tool, but it requires, you to go through it as an individual and hire counsel, to go through it on your behalf, right? Like, don't take the franchisor's word for it. Like, their job is to do the sale. It's kind of like buying a home or a car. If somebody's trying to sell you something too hard, if it doesn't feel right, ask the questions. And if you don't want to go through that process, maybe franchising is not right for you, because you're entering into, in most cases, a 10-year relationship over the term of that agreement, and hopefully longer, right? If things go well, or maybe you're going to add, additional units with that same system if you're interested in becoming a multi-unit or location owner. And a lot of these platforms now have multiple brands. So there's a lot there. And it's kind of like life. Like, it's what you make out of it. It's the questions you're asking on the front end to really, get the information. And so, yeah, the FDD and the government has, done a good job of, finding the right balance between, what they require brands to do and what they, what they make optional. You mentioned the item 19, which is the earnings claim. That's not a required disclosure for a brand, but it's increasingly becoming something that in the course of going through the franchise sales process, if a brand doesn't have an item 19, like, that should immediately be a question that you're asking the brand why, or asking your advisor why. Now, if it's an super early stage brand, it could be a misleading earnings claim if they have 1 or 2 locations.
Right.
And so there's inherently more risk with a brand that you're going to franchise with than something with like a Wingstop with a incredibly proven track record of thousands of locations over 20 plus years now. And so that it is risky, but it's all about, there's information there that you would not get with other types of investments. So
so let's talk more about let's call it misconceptions about the franchise industry. Validation and having an item 19 or earnings claim to look at is always a wonderful thing. Doing research with tons of franchisees, like a brand like Wingstop that we use as an example. But there's a lot of misconceptions, about franchising costs so much. There's fees, and you have to be a millionaire to own one, and things like that. So what do you say to that? What is the IFA doing on the educational process? I know there's a lot that you guys do on a regular basis.
Yeah, well, from a purely like, what are the fees or what are the costs? Like, again, back to the FDD, right? It's all disclosed. So, and if it's not, then, that's
another problem.
That's another problem, right? Like, then the brand, needs to be, held accountable to that. But in terms of misperceptions, just generally, like, if you're, even before you're talking maybe to one specific brand, there's a misperception that it is, only, millions of dollars of net worth that I need to go into a franchise. It's not the case. I mean, there can be, franchise investments for the low 5 figures. That may be, something that is more part-time, maybe not quite a business opportunity per se, but a biz op as it's thrown around. But, you could be buying into a mobile franchise, something that's part-time, all the way up to some of these commercial residential services franchises, can be in the low, 6 figures in terms of investment to own a territory, selling a product or a service. So there really is a range of investments. Obviously, the restaurant industry and the hotel industry are much more, sophisticated in most cases in terms of the type of investor that those brands are really looking for. And, the restaurant business, is really tough, right? Like, margins are very small on a per box, per unit location. So typically to really, build equity, you want to be in multiple locations, or at least get there over time. So that's kind of on the investment side. Misperceptions, On the policymaker side, like we can go there if you want to go there a little bit.
Sure.
Sometimes, there's a perception that, the brand is really controlling, the business, right? And that, franchisees are, effectively just, glorified middle managers, who are just sort of taking orders from the franchisor, and it's not really their business. You were a Wingstop franchisee. I probably count on zero fingers how many times Wingstop told you, what to pay your employees, who to hire, how to do this. Now there's a playbook. There's hundreds of other people running that same business that you can talk to and bounce, ideas off of. But your market, who you're employing. That is, sometimes a misperception that is out there. The other misperception is that these are only big brands, and we touched on this earlier in terms of the full range of types of businesses that are out there, not just in the restaurant world, but commercial services, residential, business to business services, real estate. I guess one more that we deal with is that franchising is really not diverse and isn't doing enough to promote diversity. In fact, franchising has double the number of women and immigrants and minorities as business owners as the broader small business ecosystem. So, we really do have a great story to tell on that front too. Franchisees, they're kind of these like hidden small business owners, all throughout the economy. And I think that is sometimes because of, the brand itself, is really what the consumer is looking for. They're not necessarily patronizing, Lance's Wingstop because they know Lance. They're going there because of, the convenience, like the quality, and, the product. Right. And so I do think that as the business model has grown and evolved over, many decades, it continues to, it has lost, the like local ownership piece of it that sometimes gets overlooked by, we're kind of a victim of our own success in franchising in that regard.
People always tend to forget that. It's like, oh, it's a big company like McDonald's. It's a local owner in pretty much all cases. I mean, there are some out of town owners, but in most cases, it's local ownership. People chose to do it in a certain area of Kansas because that's their hometown, right?
Right. And we've launched a campaign at the IFA called Open for Opportunity, which is all about educating, really media and influencers, whether it's members of Congress, state elected people, other kinds of business organizations in communities that we've identified as, politically important to some of the work that we're doing around the country about exactly that. What franchising does for the workforce, what kinds of corporate local charities, these local corporations or local franchisees, support. You're never going to own the brand if you're working, at a Chipotle, but if you're working at a Moe's Southwest Grill, like you could own that business, right? And telling that story and reminding people that these are local businesses is really, really important in the franchise model.
Yeah. And I always get the other misconception is, well, I don't want to just buy a job. And I always kid people about that as well. It's like, well, you get to leverage your money with usually an SBA loan. You definitely work hard for a period of time until you put a team in place. And then you have the opportunity to sell or exit at a really nice multiple because franchising has, that's a scenario in franchising. There's a great secondary market to be able to sell your business. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's another nice benefit.
Yeah, it really is. And like the people who think that way are probably not the people that, those are probably the people in your broker business that you're having to do maybe more work than is worth the while. And, maybe the brands need not be looking at some of those people that have some of those misconceptions. Now you do have the ability to overcome that. But yeah, again, on the secondary market and the transaction piece, I mean, there's a lot of that going on right now. Just, not not any different than everybody in the workforce thinking about, their next thing. So we have a lot of people coming in, a lot of people that are in buying locations of people that, have gotten a really nice career and built some equity and, maybe want to get out. Maybe they're not going to pass it on to their kids, or their kids want to do something different. And again, back to the FDD and some of the other financial information that's available in the franchise model, more so than, some, traditionally, pure independent business. There's information about, how these locations are doing from a financial performance perspective in most cases. And so, you can really kind of situation plan or financial plan yourself, over a long period of time.
Yeah, the information's out there if you want to see it. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to.
Exactly.
Working with a broker like myself and my friends, I mean, we always recommend using a franchise attorney. Some people do take us up on that. Some people don't. And it's different from a regular attorney. I want to hit Matt on, you were talking about diversity a little bit earlier. And one of the things that some people don't even realize is veterans.
Yeah.
I mean, last I looked, the last stat was 14% of franchisees, if I remember correctly. 14%.
That is exactly what. Yeah, according to the most recent government data, it's probably higher because it is actually sometimes veterans don't self-report that they are when they do this government reporting on the small business census. And if you think about following the playbook of a franchise in terms of skill, it's very similar to a team-based approach that is very well taught in the military. And so the skills are very transferable. We've also, for 30 plus years now at the IFA, had a program called VetFran. And VetFran has about 600 brand members of ours who have discounts off initial franchise fees for qualified veterans. So, 10, 20, sometimes 50% off of that initial franchise fee that could be, upwards of $50,000 in some cases, a not insignificant discount, because brands know that if they can recruit the right vet into the system, they're going to be some of their highest performers. So they're not worried about giving that up on the front end. And veterans also face greater access to capital and financial challenges, given, they've been in the military, often a lot of transition with their spouses and families. So it's a great program, something we're really proud of. And we've been talking about that story really this year as the 30th anniversary. So you can check out vetfran.org for more information about the IFA VetFran program, if that's of interest.
I love it. That's fantastic. Let's talk about the changing times with technology and how that's impacted. When I think of franchising, I've been in it a long time myself. I want to know your opinion. Besides technology, and we can talk about technology, that's made a heck of a difference, with a lot of brands and how they're selling and getting in touch with people. And not only that, just managing the process with learning management systems and, I mean, everything across the board. So what are your thoughts on the changing times, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, COVID accelerated a lot of this, and, probably for the good in most cases. So whether it's the franchise development side of things, where brands used to host things called discovery days, where they'd fly, 20 franchisees that are, interested in the system, into their corporate headquarters or some other, site, and all the corporate team would be there, and you'd meet and greet people. And there's still brands that are doing that. And, I'm still a huge fan of face-to-face interaction, but, maybe whittling that list down a little bit further through, virtual discovery days. Like that's something we're seeing. There's a huge amount of technology that goes into the franchise lead development process. I was a couple of weeks ago at the International Franchise Expo in New York City, and expos are still a good source of talking to early prospects or meeting with somebody that's later in the system. But most brands are spending more than 50% of their franchise development budget on digital, and meeting people where they are, on something like this, right, where you may be getting served an ad. Watching videos and, filling out lead forms online. And then, on the customer side, you mentioned, Wingstop and some of the impact during COVID, but it's not just the restaurant industry with mobile delivery. I mean, all the commercial and residential platforms are heavily investing in a better customer experience for, people that are constantly on the go and are dealing with a barrage of information being thrown at them all day, every day. So I think as you're investigating a franchise system, like asking those questions, like how is your brand, dealing with the digital evolution, and what are the things that you're investing in that are going to help me as a potential franchisee become profitable and find and keep customers. So it's really dynamic, and there's a ton going on. We do a ton at the IFA and our events to teach franchisors, best practices and information share. The next industry conference I'll be at next week in Atlanta is a customer experience conference that we're putting on with a group called Franchise Update Media, and it's the intersection of technology and marketing and operations, which are 3 of the 5 or 6 disciplines that every franchisor has, on their senior leadership team.
Sounds wonderful. There's no doubt when people are paying their franchise fee, some people really have to be educated on, well, why do I pay that fee? And a lot of what you just mentioned, there are some brands spending an absolute fortune on not only technology, but proprietary systems that, they hope to recoup a little bit of that when they charge a franchise fee. I mean, is that the purpose of a franchise fee? Does anybody have that out there in writing anywhere? What is the purpose of a franchise fee?
I mean, it's a great question. If it's not, really out there, it probably should be in a more, sort of simplified version. We use industry speak a lot, right, in franchising, but that would be a good piece to have, out there and educate the prospective franchisee in layman's terms. Why am I spending $25,000 or $50,000, before I'm even open, beyond what I have to spend to like do the build out? And the reality is, it's to make sure that the brand has the resources financially to set you up for success and ensure that success over the long term. It's not just we got to get your doors open and okay, now you're doing it all yourself, right? It really is a win-win, and that fee is to help create the win-win. Now, we talked about earlier, not every franchisor is created equal, and asking those types of questions, in the courting phase, the dating phase, is really important.
I love the dating phase. Exactly. No, I also educate people on the fact that, if you were going to do a business, not a franchise, you're going to create your own. Most people don't have an original idea that needs to be born, but if you did, you're going to have to hire quite a few people to match the experience and the proven history of a good franchise. And you're going to be spending the money anyway, and in some cases, even more so. So you're getting a deal when you're paying a franchise fee for that experience, if you've investigated right, and hopefully you work with a broker, but that's another story. So what do you see in the future? I mean, look, if you look at the growth trajectory of franchising, even through the pandemic, there was probably, was there still growth through the pandemic? If you look at the history, it still seems to be pretty straight up as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think that will continue. I think the thing that we're seeing the most in terms of trends right now is consolidation. Both, probably for your audience, it's more consolidation at the brand level, into what, being sort of brands being bundled into so-called platform companies. So it could be, 5, it could be 10, it could be 30, in some cases. And that's a big trend, and something, that I think is a net positive for the industry, because, a franchise or infrastructure is very similar, from brand to brand, especially in the same, sector, restaurant, commercial or residential service, hospitality. And that creates economy of scale and opportunities for, customer acquisition and experience across that platform. So, I think that for a lot of reasons, prospective franchisees, existing franchisees, is a trend that we're going to continue to see. There is consolidation and more kind of outside money happening at the franchisee level, more so on the restaurant, hospitality, and to a degree on some of the retail concepts, the non-food retail, with private equity and venture capital money kind of making its way into the business model. That's something I worry about, because as we were talking about earlier, Lance, it is a business model that is all about small business ownership and opportunity for people of lesser means to get into franchising, who may not be able to go into business for themselves or have their own unique idea. And so, I do worry about that a little bit in terms of what the future of franchising is. But there's still a lot of individuals that have, built, great wealth and opportunity. And I think that will continue for some time.
Yeah, and the way I see it is private equity always goes where the money is. So in many instances, it's a big compliment that they love to get involved in the world of franchising. And the fact of the matter is that I think there are ways to see the positive in it. There are still mom and pops every day. I'm talking to two founders of a barbecue chain, and we're setting up for franchising. And their hope and wish one day is they'll get bought out by private equity. Well, why not? You worked really, really hard. Why not plan for a great exit?
Yeah, I mean, private equity has its own set of misperceptions. I'm not saying that it's a bad vehicle. It's just what I worry about is the ability for us to tell our story changes when it's when franchisee locations are owned by private capital. Not truly, locally owned and operated. And so, that to a degree is
total. I totally understand that. In most cases, it is sometimes hard for the private equity guys to do that. They rather buy the brand and manage the executive team.
Well, exactly.
So tell me, and then sell for their 10 multiple, which has been the history, right? So tell me, what do we miss today, Matt? I mean, we covered quite a few things. What do we miss? What does the future hold? What do you see once we get past this inflation, which we're in the midst of, unfortunately? Yeah,
I mean, I think the future is bright. I think the business model continues to evolve, and I think what we need to focus on, at the IFA and people that are already in franchising is keep our house in order, right? Franchising is pretty simple when franchisees are making money, franchisors are making money, and having the right suppliers enables the business model to continue to grow without outside disruption, which is something that will always be a threat, because as you say, follow the money, right? So where private equity firms are putting money, it's because they see a return on investment. Things that are going to continue to be a threat to our business model are things like organized labor sees us as a growth opportunity. They want to change policies for their benefit. So that's something that we've been fighting at the federal level. We're fighting it right now in the state of California.
That's pretty much number one on the list, probably, right?
It is number one on the list. It will probably be number one on the list until the Service Employees International Union says, you know what, this fight is not worth having because we can't prevail. And it's our job to make sure that they can't do that, because if we don't have a separation between franchisor and franchisee, we don't have franchising. And that is the unique special sauce that makes franchising work is brands go find people who can operate in local communities and perform better than they believe they can perform, owning these locations themselves.
Just using somebody else's system. That's it. There's nothing, leave franchising alone, for God's sakes.
Amen to that, Lance.
So final thoughts for you today, Mr. Matt Haller.
Franchising can take you anywhere you want to go in your journey. Like there's something for everybody. Maybe you've got a concept you think is franchisable. Maybe you want to become a franchisee. You can work with a great broker network, or you're somebody that's interested in technology or law or marketing or sales. There's all sorts of roles, whether it's at a brand or as a supplier. And so, you can start your journey all sorts of places. I'll put a shameless plug in for starting it, through the IFA, and franchise.org is a great place to poke around and learn a little bit more about what we do and who our members are and some of those stories that are out there. So I appreciate the time to share, my story in franchising and some of what we're working on at the IFA, and appreciate the opportunity to be with you, Lance.
My pleasure, Matt. Thank you so much. And look forward to meeting you live soon enough.
Sounds great.
Take care. Thank you very much for listening today. Please like, follow, and subscribe. This is Lance Graulich. Until next time.